move to strike last word. I think what we're seeing here, and I'll join in the concerns raised by the gentleman from North Carolina and the gentleman from Colorado, is that in an effort to add more and more on here, we're recognizing just how many different groups and faiths and ethnicities are being left out. And if we are truly to address acts of domestic terrorism motivated by all forms of bigotry, then that's where the amendment should end. And so I think that the gentleman from Colorado had an eloquent suggestion about how to encompass all of the different faiths that are across this country, and yes, in California, and all of the different ethnicities that are across this country, and yes, in California, and all of the different racial forms of racial bigotry that we want to combat, including those that exist in California. So I understand where the gentleman is coming from, and I think that in an effort to make this as broad as possible, California being one of the most diverse states in the nation, and someone who is seeking to address all of the different diverse groups that exist in the state of California, would want to support ending this sentence at the word bigotry and addressing all forms of bigotry that contribute to acts of domestic terrorism.
Mr. Cline, would you yield?
I yield to the gentleman from Rhode Island.
Thanks so much. I appreciate your observations. What I would suggest that I think Mr. Schiff has articulated, but I'd like to sort of repeat, is I think the amendment acknowledges, of course, there should be appropriate oversight of all forms of bigotry. But I think we all have to acknowledge that with respect to anti-AAPI hate and anti-Semitism and white nationalism, those are areas of particular concern, not because Mr. Schiff pulled them out of the sky, but because we've seen an alarming increase in those areas in particular that have resulted in really horrific violence. And so it's not that we value those communities anymore, but it specifically says including them and calls them out, because as a Judiciary Committee, I think we want to signal to the country that we recognize these three areas that has been just a significant increase of violence. That's not just our impression. The data supports it by every agency that's collected it. So this amendment does both things. It acknowledges our responsibility to combat bigotry of all kinds, and in particular, it acknowledges what we see as alarming increases in these specific areas. And so I think it strikes exactly the right balance. I urge you to not advance this argument about just saying bigotry, but to say out loud where some of the worst harms are happening, and I thank you for yielding.
Well, I thank the gentleman from Rhode Island, and I think that the data would show that in California, you do have examples of different groups that are targeted more and that are seeing that type of violence more than you would see in Rhode Island, than you would see in Virginia. And so I do think that in order for us to represent all of our constituents and not just those from California, we would want to end the sentence after bigotry and make sure that we can all make it a focus of this committee that we are definitely focused on confronting acts of domestic terrorism motivated by all forms of bigotry, and end it at that. I yield back.